I'm Dianne Donovan here in the KMFA studio, the Drayland Mesa Music Studio of KMFA, with the great jazz trumpeter and composer Terence Blanchard. He's in town to bring us excerpts in concert of his opera, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, based on the book, memoir by New York Times columnist Charles M. Blow, with libretto by Casey Lemons, as presented by Texas Performing Arts this Thursday night, the 9th, 7:30 p.m. at the McCullough Theater. Welcome, Terence Blanchard.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. I've been a fan following your career since the 80s. I do jazz radio shows, and I remember playing your early albums with the ones you did with Donald Harrison.
Oh, yeah, okay, right.
And I had the opportunity to interview you about 30 years ago, just about the time you were, not transitioning, but expanding your musical language into films, around the time you did the scores for Jungle Fever and Malcolm X.
Oh,
excellent.
yeah.
Beautiful music. Spike Lee films. I remember asking you at the time, what was it like making the leap from jazz clubs to film writing? Now, of course, I want to ask you what it was like to delve into the world of opera, although I know this is not your first opera. First, you had The Champion in 2013, and then Fire Shut Up in My Bones 2019.
Sure.
You opened the Met season 2021-2022 after the longest break.
Right.
We all know what happened.
Yeah.
The longest break, and you were the first black composer to have an opera performed by the Met. Pretty amazing things going on. A little late, but we're thankful.
Slightly
late, yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I want to ask you about that process of the opera, but first, for those who may not know this opera, could you tell us a little bit about the story and where that title comes from Jeremiah?
Well, Fire Shut Up in My Bones is a quote that Charles Blow had attributed to the use of his book, the title of his book. But for me, the interest in the story came about once I read the book. And, well, first of all, let me back up. I've been a big fan of Charles Blow's for a long time. I loved his writing. I used to love his commentary when I would see him on CNN. And I was proud of him because he's from Louisiana. He's kind of like a homeboy. And when I read his book, it was a powerful read because I related to the culture that he grew up in. It's very similar to what I've experienced. But the being molested as a kid was a rough part for me. And the thing that I thought of was for him to come through all of that and to become the resounding success that he is today spoke a lot about his resilience and his strength. And a lot of times when we deal with these type of topics, we deal with them posthumously. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted him to be able to speak to how he came through that, and it was great because when we premiered it in St. Louis in 2019, I walked over to him after. We were getting ready to do our curtain call, and we're standing on the side of the stage, and I said, "Are we okay?" And he goes, "Yeah, no." He said, "This was great." He says, "This let me know that I'm not that person anymore." Wow. And that was a powerful moment for all of us because that was the confirmation of the notion that we did the right thing in doing the story because we knew it was going to help a lot of people. And just to give a little more insight into that, when it went to New York at the Met, I remember standing in the lobby the night of the premiere, and I was talking to some folks, and this other guy, he walked over to me in tears, and he grabbed my hand and he said, "Thank you, I'm a survivor." And that's all he said, and then he moved on. But to me, it spoke to the power of art and what we do and how it could help people heal, and I was proud at that moment because, we had created something that could be beneficial to a lot of people.
Also, the opera, his story, the opera speaks to what is manhood. I'm wondering, in your mind, what takes him so long to tell his story to, well, in this case, Greta, then his mom, but
Right.
is it protecting myself, or is it so I could be the manly?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you look at his story, there's an aria in the opera called "Peculiar Grace." You know, I once was a boy of peculiar grace.
Yeah.
You know, and to me, that's the entire story. You know, it's a kid who's trying to belong, trying to find his way, but there's always something a little different about him that everybody else could recognize. And for him, he just wanted to belong to a community. And he had to find his way through that. And he was coming of age at the same time. You know, so that was a lot in itself for any young person to deal with. But I think what took him so long to come to terms with that is the fighting that notion of what makes a man, what is manhood, all of those questions, you know, and growing up in a place where Bonnie and Clyde were killed, you know, where there's a certain element of a macho attitude and a gun culture, you know, of course that had to be very confusing for a young kid and very frustrating for a young man, you know, to come out at that time in Louisiana. So it made sense to me that he took a long time to come out and talk about it, you know, to someone that he loved. But I'm glad that he did, because there's so many that didn't.
That's for sure. And that was one of the pieces I wanted to mention that really capture his inner conflict. There once was a boy of peculiar grace, and then sometimes you got to leave. His mom giving him that advice, but sometimes you got to leave. But interestingly enough, you start the opera where he's thinking, he's bent on revenge, understandably so. I thought that was brilliant. Was that your idea or the librettist? Or?
No, it was Casey Lemon's idea of like starting there and then going back. It was a sense of giving the opera a sense of drama, you know, because it sets up the entire thing, you know, because I think for a lot of people who may have not read the book, to coming to see an opera about Charles Blow, you don't really know what to expect, you know, and then to see that and to see him enraged like that, you know, we felt was a powerful moment. It was very different from the way we opened up Champion. Champion was opened up in a more reflective kind of way, but with this, you know, and it really set the tone, and then it really just we bookended the opera with that, you know, at the end. And it just made so much sense because it just took us on his entire journey, and then it made sense as to why he was so enraged.
Right, absolutely. Well, I've always believed that truth always comes out, kind of eventually. You can suppress it for a long time, but it's like a splinter in your soul. And I've always thought of it that way, and I've had my own splinters.
Sure.
And it may take many years, but eventually it's going to make its way out. So that was just a beautiful way to do it. But in order to move on, he did have to acknowledge what happened. Like he did have to tell someone. You can't, if you keep it in, you break.
Of course, but I think also telling his mom was a very powerful moment, you know, which we don't really show. That's how we end the opera. But
it's beautiful.
But the thing that I thought about was, you know, he still was attracted to women. You know, and the confusion of where all of that was going for him had to be powerful, you know, and to confide in someone that you deem as a lover, someone you love and you want to trust and have that person to be able to confide in, only for that person to walk away. You know, when you're confiding the most intimate and sensitive details of your life, had to be extremely.
You could see that coming. It's like you're almost going, no, don't say it.
No, I know. I know.
But that's what makes the drama and reality.
It is, and it's one of my, oddly enough, musically, it's one of my favorite parts of the opera. It just seems like everything is taking us up to that moment, you know. And when she says, you know, her heart belongs to somebody else, you know, basically that's what she said. You know, that just reading it in the libretto just was heart-wrenching for me.
you're in town, as I say, to give us excerpts from the opera. But first, how do you approach an opera? Because it's different even than a movie, right? Like a
Man, with prayer.
yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, it's a daunting thing. I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to find my way in that world. For me, the thing my composition teacher is a guy named Roger Dickinson, who I would call anytime I would have like big moments in my life, musical moments. Like when I started doing film, I'd give him a call. So when I was called to do Champion, my first opera, I called him up, and one of the things he said was trust your training, and then he said, don't write an opera, tell a story.
Wow.
And so when he told me that, that's what I did for Champion. And then there's some things that I learned about writing opera, going from Champion to Fire. So one of the big things for me is I really want my melodic lines to feel just as natural as La Boheme. La Boheme, the thing that I love about that opera, and I love a lot of different other composers as well, but there's something about La Boheme and Turandot that blow me away in terms of how the melody line, along with the libretto, they develop the same way, the same time. You know what I mean? They move together. And that's what I really wanted for all of my lines. So, being the nerd that I am, I would literally read the libretto out loud. And when I would read it out loud, I would hear the rhythm in my voice of what I was reading, and then I would write those rhythms underneath the words in the libretto, and that's how I would start. And then I would pick moments of like where the apex of the story was, the emotional rises and falls were, and then just make mental notes about that, and then let that guide me in terms of how the melody should evolve. It's a lot of work, because once that takes a lot just to get that part down. Right. But then once you have that, the melody and the harmony and all of that stuff, then the orchestration, that becomes like really important because that helps to tell a story as well.
Yes, and I love the infusion of blues and jazz in the music. And then I even heard what sounded like an old-timey film theme, like we're going back into it. Was so. I love this fusion.
Well, the thing is, the thing that I think about, opera was radical. It was radical at its time because it was trying to tell stories, and it didn't shy away from tough topics.
Sure didn't. No.
You know what I mean? Some of those things seem kind of light now in comparison, but we have to remember from when they were created. And one of the things that I think about is that, if Verdi, if Puccini, if any of those guys were around today, they'd be utilizing everything at their disposal to tell these stories.
Especially,
even because listen, nobody loves classic opera more than I do. I mean, I love classic opera, but we have other things that can help us tell a story. Absolutely. And when I when I learned from the singers that a lot of them grew up in the church, a lot of them were jazz singers, and they were always told to turn that side of their musical life off to sing Puccini or to sing the Ring Cycle, right? And my thinking is, okay, I get it, because that style of music didn't exist when those pieces were created. Okay, fine. But what we're doing is current. And what we're doing is trying to bring our culture to the stage. So, I told all the singers, I said, listen, man, I don't care what your background is. Bring all of that stuff to bear if you feel that it would help you convey the story in a more authentic way. And they all, picked it up and just ran with it. I mean, Angel Blue Oh
Angel
my
Blue is
God,
amazing,
she was
and I
amazing.
love the character of loneliness and the
Yes,
angel. It's
Destiny.
so
Yeah.
beautiful. And we also Will Liverman. Oh my gosh, a tour de force, right?
Right, exactly.
Latanya Moore. She's performed here in Austin. It's interesting what you said
Well, she's
about.
from Texas.
Yeah, yes, she is.
Yes.
And I think it's Houston.
Yeah.
But you were talking about telling the story, and we just did the live opera, Austin Opera, on Sunday, Pagliacci. So
Okay.
Leon Cavallo, he wrote the libretto so he could write the music along with his own rhythms, but also it was based on a story from his childhood,
Okay.
wherein
Right.
there was an acting troupe coming to town wherein the man killed his wife at after that. He said, and seeing that, he shaped my life as a young child, and the fact that my father was a judge in the trial
Oh.
really shaped. It's like
Right. Right.
that's verismo. This is real life.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, when we did Champion in New Orleans, that's when it really convinced me, because there was a gentleman that came up to me after the show, and he just said to me, he said, "Man, if this is opera, I'd come." And I went, right?
Yeah.
Well, because first of all, he remembered the fight with Emil Griffith.
Yes.
He remembered it. He remembered Friday night fights, and for him, he's seeing his life, or he's seeing his culture on the stage, and that's what Yannick, the conductor at the Met, we talked about it. He said, "Listen, man, we have to do current stories." He said, of course we're music nerds, and we love all the classics.
Right.
But this art form itself was created to tell stories.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I always laugh because, man, touring La Boheme is such a classic. I went to see it at the Met, and I'll never forget, man, when the curtain opened for the second act, the set got an applause. Nobody was on the stage yet. And people stood up for the set.
That's the Met.
Yeah, that was amazing to me. Hopefully we can create something like that one day.
Yes, well, on Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. at McCullough Theater, Texas Performing Arts will present you, and you will be performing with the smaller ensemble, the Turtle Island Quartet, amazing, and vocalists Nicholas Newton and Adrian Danrich. Was it difficult to condense? I'm sure that's not even the right word. Condense the score.
It wasn't difficult for me because I didn't do it.
Oh, I did not.
No. I had David Balakrishnan, the guy who leads the quartet.
Right.
I had him do it because I was working on some other stuff, and I was just bombarded with stuff. And it's my little trick because I love his writing.
Yeah.
I love what he does, and I'm trying to find somebody to commission him to write an opera.
Wow.
So I wanted, him to just have the experience of like dealing with the melodic content and then shaping it for this organization,
Great.
for this band.
And I should mention, you will be playing as well.
Yes.
I haven't heard you live in a while. That's going to be amazing. What are you working on next, outside of this tour?
You know what's been interesting? Nothing. And it's been great, because my life is always based around me doing something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, because the strike. There was a strike in L.A., the writers' strike.
Yeah.
And now the actors are on strike, so
Yes.
there's no film or television work.
Right.
And people are worried about it. Of course we're all concerned, but man, it's been nice having a break.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm supposed
Without
to.
COVID.
Yes, without COVID, exactly. But I have a new opera that I'm going to start working on, and we don't know the title, the subject matter yet.
Oh.
We're still researching a few books that we're thinking about. Then I'm going to be doing a new album with the E Collective.
Yeah.
So we're getting prepared for that. But right now, man, I'm watching my Saints lose, and I'm watching some NBA games and watching Charles Barkley on Shaq and TNT. That's been it. And it's been
He's
great.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time. Terence Blanchard, we're looking forward to this Thursday evening's performance of Fire Shut Up in My Bones, the concert, excerpts of the concert version, and thank you for taking the time with us today.
Thank you for having me. This has been nice.